Welcome back. We've already looked at prayer as conversation and the Bible as his letters to us. But I want to talk to you about something now that if you don't have this, you will fail. You cannot complete the spiritual life. You cannot live a good life hearing God's voice if you do not have this. Straight out the gate, it's just not going to work. I want to talk to you about people, friendships. If you don't learn to embrace others, to involve other people in your life, and particularly in your life, trying to hear what God is saying and trying to find out who God is, you'll fail pretty quickly. You can get a fair way on your own. If you think of your life as building a jigsaw puzzle, you've thrown all the pieces on the desk and now you're sorting out, and the first easiest thing to do is find your corners. You find your corners and then you find any other straight jigsaw piece. You got 1 corner, 2 corner, 3, 4, you got the 4 corners, and then you find any other piece of the jigsaw that have got a straight edge. You've now made 4 corners and a border. That's pretty easy. You can do that on your own. You don't need a lot of help. But as the puzzle gets more intricate and more involved, and there are more shapes and colours and more nuance to the pieces, you're going to need more help. And that's where friendship comes in. You can begin to pray on your own, and I hope you have. You can go and read the Bible by yourself, and I hope you have. But actually, really, to unlock what it's like to hear God's voice, you're going to need to involve others. We mentioned a story a couple of videos ago from the book of 1 Samuel, the story of the old man Eli and the young pup Samuel. And that it was Eli who pointed out that when Samuel thought he was being called by the old man, it was actually God calling him. And Eli gave him some advice, really simple. He said, next time you hear it, answer, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And Samuel did that, and as a result began to hear God's voice. What would have happened if Samuel didn't have an Eli? Or what if he still had the Eli, but the Eli he had in a different version, a multiverse version of the story, he just doesn't say, next time ask for God. He says, while you're here, go and get me a water and some bread, or go and whatever, empty the bedpan, I don't know, whatever he'd want. We need an Eli. We need others. That story is not only a story in the Bible that talks and pushes us towards friendship and gives us an example of if we don't have others with us on the walk, we're going to suffer and it's going to be difficult. It's a very famous story in the Old Testament where there is a battle. Israel's fighting a battle, and Moses, their leader at this point, is up on a high kind of mountaintop or a hill, and he's overlooking the battle. And Moses got this big staff he used to use, and if he holds his arm and the staff up, his side's winning the battle. But as he gets tired and his arms begin to drop a little bit as the battle goes on, if he drops his arms, the battle begins to go against his army and the opposition begins to take advantage. But luckily enough for Moses, in this story, he has Aaron and he has a guy called Hur, and they hold Moses' arms up. So even though my guy's sagging, they hold his arms up and they win the battle. And it's a great example, quite an obscure and strange example really, but an example of sometimes you need someone to come alongside you and give you a bit of their strength. When you go to the New Testament, you enter into a book called the Book of Acts. You've got the first Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And then you have the Acts of the Apostles. This is about the birth of the early church. And in the first chapter, or maybe second chapter, it says, the first thing that's said of the church is they were all together in one place. And then as the church grows and multiplies and thousands join, it says that they continue to meet together. They did not neglect meeting together. They always gathered together in homes and in public places and in the synagogue. They were always somehow bound together. They'd understood that, yeah, you can build a framework, but really to fill this thing out, the walk with God, you've really got to involve other people. About 13 years ago, I had a phone call from someone I barely knew. And he said, "Hey, Rick, I'm getting together a group of guys and I think I want to start meeting regularly with a bunch of guys. Are you up for it?" I said, "Yeah, why not, man? Sounds good to me." So we all met for dinner, and I didn't know anyone but this one guy, and I hardly knew this guy at all really well. And everyone said their piece, and then we decided, there's 6 of us here. Let's meet for 12 weeks. Let's meet for 12 weeks and see how it goes. 13 years later, we were still meeting every fortnight. And it changed my whole outlook on life and friendship and on hearing God and walking with God. It just changed everything. I entered into a level of permission with other guys of they can speak into my life and they can understand my story. And it just changed everything. It just was a massive shift for me. We need other people. We need them. Modern life has created these algorithm islands that we all inhabit. We can stay quite safely on the island, just amusing ourselves and not having to be poked or prodded by anything we don't like. We just dislike, swipe, unfollow. But if you're going to really live the life of faith, if you're going to hear God's voice, then you need to be in friendships that you can't turn off. You should be in friendships, but you should never be in control of friendships. Friendships are an agreement between two individuals to be involved in each other's life. And any friendships where there's someone has more power than another, they won't last very long. When God created man and woman, well, actually, when he just created man, actually, he turned around, he looked at, this is in the first book of the Bible, he turned around, he looks at this one guy and he goes, it's not good for this guy to be alone. And that's when he creates women. But actually, the bigger story is for men and women, it's not good for us to be alone. If we're going to hear God's voice, if we're going to walk into the purposes that he has for us, we're going to need each other. We're going to need to stop seeing people as anything but our partners. We've talked about prayer as conversation, and it is. We've talked about the Bible as his letters, and it is. But we need to start thinking about people as his partners, that actually people in our lives are able to speak into us and help us understand what God is saying. I can't tell you how valuable it's been with those guys in that group for them to get to know me, and at times when I can't hear what God is saying, for them to speak into me, or for when I have a dream or I have an impression or a feeling to do something, to be able to tell them and them to be able to say, yeah, I feel like God is saying this. To have them come up to me out of the blue and say, I was praying for you, Rick, and I felt God say this, and it to marry up with something that I hadn't told anyone. Spiritual life is meant to be lived in community. We were not made to do life alone. We're certainly not made to hear God's voice alone. And we're certainly not going to walk into our purpose and become who God really wants us to be if we're alone. We're not to exist as islands. People are our partners in hearing his voice. There's a verse in the New Testament that says, don't forget to keep meeting together and don't forget to encourage one another. That word encourage is an interesting word. It means to literally to pour courage into another. Don't forget to encourage one another. I hope this has been helpful. Do check out the other videos we've got on hearing from God, prayer, the Bible. Check out our series on Jesus, our series on understanding and reading the Bible. Till next time, take care of yourself. Laters.